Welcome, welcome. As you guys heard, we're going to actually start today with, again, the foundational work, which is the Gate of Trust, the Shar Bitachon. Like I was telling the ladies before, we have done this text a number of times, and we've done other texts in the meantime as well. But we're going to go back to the fundamentals. So what I want to do today before, and you can get this book on Amazon, or you can get it on Cajos, and you could probably get it on your local Judaica store as well. And I'll be sure, if you want, in the replay email, also send out a link so you can get it. You certainly don't need it. It's a beautiful thing to have, and I encourage everybody to learn it as well, not just with me, but to learn it maybe 5 minutes a day with your spouse. You could even learn it with a child. Oh, there's Sherry showing us our notes, what I'm going to do today is actually, before we learn inside the text, what I find, which we did recently, but I want to do it again, which I find really, really, really helpful, is to go through an overview of the entire text, because I find that for a lot of people, they start reading the text and it starts getting a little bit confusing, even though it's a very logical text. Literally, it has a very clear logic, and the logic is so that it's going to change your way of thinking, because throughout the text, not only is he going to be teaching us the concept of bitachon, but very interestingly, he's also going to be speaking to all of our questions that would come about regarding this topic. But nevertheless, I find that many people start tackling the book, and if they don't have a map, kind of like a bird's eye view of where they're going, they might get a little bit frustrated and not finish it, which is really, really sad, because as Linda and Sherry and anybody who's been here in this class for a number of, already, I want to say years, I feel like we've been doing this for a very long time, can tell you it can be really, really life-changing. And every chapter and everything in this book is really a gem, and it really helps rewire your thinking and get to a better emotional place and a relationship with, not just with your financial life, but with people and with just life circumstances and how to react to life circumstances. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a map overview of what is in this book before we get to the nitty-gritty, so that you can now start in kind of envisioning the situation. So the first thing is that the book has an introduction. And like any introduction, it's going to give you snippets of information that the author is going to really expound on later on in the text. And again, many people read the introduction and they start asking many, many questions, which are going to get very impatient, but they're going to be answered throughout the text. He's not going to give you all the answers in the introduction, but it's actually a very dense introduction. And what he does in the introduction is he begins with the 10 benefits of this thing called bitachon, this thing called trust, which trust is actually, before we talk about the benefits, I should say it's a bit of a loose translation, because if we really understand the word in Hebrew and the concept that we're learning, it would be better to translate as reliance, dependence, like a complete, like a complete surrender to something that's guaranteed, right? Maybe reliance is a better word. It's not just trust, because trust, we say, okay, we trust a friend or we trust our doctor, right? But really, when we're talking about the concept of bitachon, it's so much more than that. It really goes back to what we've said so many times, and probably the most important word in this class, which is relationship. Why do I say that? Because the idea of reliance is the idea of something that is extremely critical to a real relationship. I mean, we can say it in human relationships. We know that any healthy relationship, in any healthy relationship, there has to be an element of trust. Well, imagine with your creator. And so when we look at the etymology of the word bitachon, within that word is a very interesting word, which is the word tach. And that word, tes, ches, tach, is actually means like a plaster. Like in Spanish, we would call it like a yeso, something that that cements things together, that attaches, like an adhesive element that attaches things together. And we can ask ourselves, like, why would that be? What does that idea have to do with bitachon? Why is that at the core, at the root of the word? Well, if we think about it, it's because it's telling us actually something very important, and it's telling us the essence of what bitachon really is. Bitachon is something that is going to cement the two entities, the one who trusts and the one who's being trusted. That's the essence of that relationship. That relationship, there's going to be such reliance that I'm literally cementing myself, attaching myself to that whom I trust. And that's what we're going for, right? So we're talking here about, yes, there are going to be 10 benefits to trust, and they are fabulous benefits. They're material, and they're in Torah, spiritual matters, as well as in material, physical matters in our lives. However, by the end of the book, we are going to understand that this is so much more than about how I benefit, right? The benefits are there regardless, but the concept of developing this attribute of bitachon, of reliance in my creator and surrender to my creator and complete dependence. In Spanish, we would say entrega, like give myself completely over and depend on my creator, really, really goes much deeper than just what I'm getting out of it. And yes, definitely I'm getting things out of it, but at the end of the book, we're going to see that really we're aiming for something so much higher, or that what develops as a result of the process, please God, should be something a lot more higher in our lives. Okay, so 10 benefits of trust. So he's going to give us 5 spiritual benefits, and then he's going to give us 5 physical benefits. Okay, so 5 in terms of our spirituality, and 5 in terms of our our material or physical existence, etc. And I will admit that when we read it inside the text, they sound a little bit blurry, like, really, this is physical, not spiritual, this is spiritual, not physical. I'm not a stickler with like which one is physical and which one is spiritual, as long as we understand that there are 10 benefits that he's talking about, and we have a general idea what those 10 benefits are. Even better if we know them by heart, but I don't think it's as fundamental as other parts of the book to know it by heart. But let me just go over the what's it called? The 10 benefits. So the first benefit of trust, again, we're only in the introduction. Okay. The first benefit of trust is that this person is going to be confidently reliant in this entity in whom we trust, because his trust is not misguided. So this first benefit is going to talk to us about it. It's going to talk to us about the idea of the reliance and the confident reliance that comes about when I am not putting my trust or my reliance in things that are unreliable, i.e., misguided trust. So because his trust is not misguided towards unreliable things, he is a very reliant person. So what would be misguided trust? And he goes on and he tells us what are the things that people tend to put their trust on, right? And he's opening up our eyes by giving us this concept. You know what? You're going to be confidently reliant. You're going to be, here they call it in the Felig edition, in this white book that we use, they call it tranquility. There's going to be a tranquility, but when we learn it inside, we really understand that it's really referring to the reliance that really comes about in a confidently calm kind of reliance, because our trust is not misguided. And so he's going to describe what is misguided trust. What would be the things that I could be foolish enough to put my trust on? And there are 3 things that he gives us. He gives us our wits, right? Our smarts, our wit. He gives us our might, right? Our strength, and our money. They sound pretty on target, right? Those are the type of things that people in general tend to rely on, right? My smarts, my degree, my connections, right? Everything that has to do with, my intellectual capability, or my strength, right? My resilience and my strength, and, my ability, whatever it is. Or many of us rely on our money, right? So these are the typical things that we tend to put our reliance on. And he's going to tell us this is completely misguided. And if we put our reliance on those things, because they are by nature unreliable, because they are in the realm of nature, because they are creation, you're going to be very, very nervous. You're not going to be a very calm person. However, if you master this thing that I'm going to teach you over the next 7 chapters, you are going to come to this tranquility, to this reliance. Why? Because you now are not going to put your reliance on these fickle things, these fickle elements of nature. Okay. So that's number one. Number two, this person is going to be free from the need to impress or ingratiate other people, right? So very often we think of bitachon as something that has to do with, our health issues, and where there's a health issue, then we kind of tap into that bitachon, or God forbid, a financial issue, then we tap into our bitachon, right? And we forget something really beautiful about this book is that it teaches us a lot of things about interpersonal relationships and how to have healthy relationships, both at work and in our personal lives. So part of this is, so again, he introduces this idea, which is going to be expounded on throughout the book, but just introduces it by giving us that one of the benefits is that we are going to be freed from this need to flatter, to impress, to ingratiate other people. We're also going to be free from the worries of material needs, of materiality, of obtaining a livelihood. Why? Because the person who masters bitachon, he says, is going to be richer than an alchemist, than the richest person in the world. What is an alchemist? Here, the author in the introduction makes a parenthesis, a deviation, not a deviation. He makes an entire section on this parable of the alchemist within the third benefit of bitachon. So again, many people read this and they get very confused. Where does this fit? It fits in the example of the alchemist, which we'll explain it in a second, fits in the third benefit of bitachon, which is that you're going to be freed from worries of material needs, material concerns. Why? Because you're going to be richer than even the richest person in the world, i.e. an alchemist. Who's an alchemist? A person who can make gold out of nothing, out of, nickel and copper and who knows what cheap metals, right? Right? So now he's going to tell us, not only am I telling you that that's going to be a benefit, but I'm going to tell you that you're going to be superior. The master of trust, the Bal Bitachon, is going to be superior to this alchemist, or this, this person who has the ability to print money, so to speak, right? In 10 ways. Not only listen, and he goes on and he lists us the 10 ways to really cement to us the potential that is here, how you can benefit from this. So what are the 10 ways in which a person is going to be better off than the richest man in the world? Number one, the alchemist is always going to be concerned and worried about how to obtain his materials. In order for him to do his alchemy, he's going to have the metals that are necessary. Whereas the master of bitachon is going to have his materials guaranteed. Whatever he needs to do, what he needs to do in this world, Hashem is guaranteed to give to him. And again, we're talking about the master of bitachon. So if the question starts in your head like, well, but I didn't have it, I didn't this, again, remind yourself, we're just going over, we're not even looking inside the text yet. But even if we're only touching in the introduction, a very important point, and it's going to all be uncovered and unraveled and explained throughout the book. This is just the introduction. So not that I don't like questions. I love questions, and we'll open it for questions at the end. But I'm saying just be patient with yourself. Allow yourself the gift of the journey that this beautiful gem of a book that was written, again, 1,000 years ago, is going to offer you. Okay. So number one, the alchemist is worried about how he's going to get his materials, whereas a master of trust has everything he needs, all the materials that he needs to do whatever he needs to do in life, absolutely guaranteed. Number two, the alchemist could be potentially harmed through his labor, right? He's doing this strange chemistry with these fumes and these materials and all this stuff. Whereas the master of trust is completely free from harm. Again, these are all the guarantees that he's giving us. So if, again, the cynic in you, and we all have it, starts asking questions, just do yourself the favor and say, obviously, he's going to answer all of my questions eventually throughout the book, okay? Benefit number 3, or not benefit number 3, I should say, the third way in which the master of trust is better off than the richest person in the world, i.e. the alchemist, is that the alchemist is very scared to share his know-how, his intel, his information, right? Whereas the master of trust has nothing to hide. There's nothing to hide, right? I'm not scared of hiding anything. But evidently the alchemist is doing something illegal. He's doing something that he shouldn't be doing, and he's going to be fearful of revealing, or that something might slip out that might let people know that he has this know-how on how to produce gold illegally, so to speak, okay? Then the number 4 is that the alchemist is concerned about his inventory, right? Do I have enough? He in his mind is like, they're like in his head, there's supply chain issues, because what if he produces too much of the gold, and then that could lead people to suspect, how did he get all this gold? And what if he doesn't produce enough, and then he runs out of gold, and then he might not have, again, the materials necessary at the time that he needs it to make more gold, right? So he's always going to be concerned about the level of inventory. Did I make enough for this period of time, right? Whereas the master of trust always has the right amount. He has exactly what he needs at the right time. Fifth point here, the fifth way in which the master of trust is better off than the richest person in the world, is that the alchemist is worried someone is going to find out his secret. So similar to number 3 before that I mentioned, I think it was the third one, where he doesn't want to share his secret, his intel, and the master of trust doesn't have anything to hide. In this one, the point is that someone could actually find out everything that he's doing and how he's doing it. Whereas the master of trust has absolutely no secret. There's nothing to hide. He's a blank canvas. His only secret is, big secret, I have God. I have God, the creator of the world, on my side. Why? Because, as we're going to learn all throughout the book, because I have created such a relationship, because, again, I have elicited it, right? Because I work on it. That's why I have this. This is my superpower, and I don't have to hide it from anyone because it's accessible to everyone, right? There's nothing to hide. So then we have another really kind of like obvious thing about the alchemist, which is the alchemist could get sick, right? He could get sick. We said before that his chemistry, his alchemy could be very harmful, or he could just get sick, and what's it going to do? It's going to impede the enjoyment of his wealth. Whereas, interestingly, he tells us here that the master of trust is actually protected from sickness, except, of course, because we're already thinking, 1 minute, I know very righteous people who get ill, right? So our brain is already asking the question. And again, we're going to deal with all these issues later, but he even tells us in the introduction, look, it's except for illness that comes to a person as a way to have a certain atonement for their soul, right? So he's already giving us the idea that we're talking about things in spiritual realms, that not everything that we can see with our physical eyes is the reality. There is a higher reality, and that sometimes people are going to, yes, face an illness, but that no illness is, God forbid, purposeless or meaningless. But in general terms, the alchemist is going to be at risk of illness impeding his enjoyment of his wealth, whereas the master of trust is guaranteed to be protected from illness, except, again, he tells us, illness that might come about in order to help his soul, right? As some sort of atonement. This is as a spiritual work, okay? Then the following is the seventh manner in which a person who has bitachon is superior to the alchemist, is that the alchemist may not have access to goods or food or, things that he needs in his life, water, toilet paper, like COVID. I don't know. The other day there was a hurricane here in Houston where I live. And I remember the day after the hurricane, we went to Walmart, and it was really shocking to see like the shelves were completely empty. And one of the staff people was sharing with us that they had to throw everything out, and that there was, there was going to be another day or two till, stock came. They lost so many fruits and vegetables and frozen goods and whatever. And my husband and I turned to each other and we said, wow, this is the classic alchemist example from the gate of trust. You can have the money to spend, but there might not be what to spend it on. There might not be access to goods or food that you might want to have access to. Whereas the master of trust receives his food directly from God. So he's guaranteed that food because he's not limited to what is accessible at Walmart, so to speak, right? Like the alchemist, right? So that's one of the ways in which the master of trust is going to be superior. And again, when we learn it inside, he's going to give us examples. And by examples, I really mostly mean verses from Tanakh, from Torah, that support what he's sharing with us. Okay. But again, I'm just giving you a map of the book. Okay. So the eighth way in which a master of trust is superior than even the richest person in the world is that the alchemist is always a fugitive. He's always on the move. This guy cannot stay very long in a given place because he's at risk of getting discovered, of getting caught, right? Whereas the master of trust can settle in a place, in a city, and live in peace. He doesn't have to be running from place to place, even looking for work. He doesn't have to be, like a chicken without a head, trying to not get caught or find something better or on the move all the time. He can be very peaceful, settled in a particular place, in a particular community. Number 9, the ninth way in which the alchemist, in which the master of trust is superior to the alchemist, is that the alchemist, at most, you guys, at most, he could lack poverty, right? That's it. That's the most he's going to get. In this world, he might not be a poor person, right? Because he can print money, he can make gold, right? So he might be wealthy, quote unquote, in this world, whereas the master of trust is going to be rich, is going to be wealthy in this world and in the world to come. So one is very limited. This master of trust is not limited. He has double wealth, so to speak, okay? And then the 10th way is that the alchemist's secret will be, God forbid, the cause of his death. Whereas the master of trust, his secret will be the cause of his honor and bring blessing to the people around him, right? And we understand that the idea that a righteous person, a righteous individual, brings blessing to his surroundings, then, and his in Spanish we say entorno, his surroundings, right? So that this is the idea. Whereas the alchemist, quote unquote, secret, what he's doing is actually a curse. It's actually going to be his destruction. The secret, quote unquote, of the master of trust is actually something that brings honor and blessing to his life and the life of others around him. Okay, so that is just benefit number 3. Now we go back to the benefits. So now we're on benefit number 4. Now, benefit number 4 and benefit number 5 are both going to touch upon the idea of, like Sherry likes when I say this in class, of a healthy relationship with money. Why? Because benefit number 4 is going to tell us, one of the benefits of mastering this concept of bitachon in your life is that you're going to relate to money or the lack of money. It could be that it's the having the money or not having the money. Either one, both of them, you're going to see them as a means to serve God. That's going to be your perspective. Having the money, it's because I can have the money. It's to serve God. And he's going to give us examples of how we should react when we have it. And then, God forbid, not having it. Oh, that's also a way to serve God. And he's going to give us examples of how to view that and how to relate to that situation where one is at a given moment doesn't have the money. But either way, the person's perspective is, this is a resource that's coming to me or not coming to me. Either one. Either situation is an opportunity for me to serve my creator. Number 5, the 5th benefit is that this person is not going to be distracted by his wealth. Why is he not distracted by his wealth? Because he's not going to become emotionally attached to it, right? His whole perspective is different. He sees it as a resource. He sees it as a means to serve God, whether in lack or in plenty. And it doesn't distract him. It doesn't become something that takes him away from his service of God because he's not emotionally attached to it. What tends to happen by most of us is that we become emotionally attached to our wealth and what we have, and that leads us to spend a lot of effort and a lot of energy that takes in the pursuit of that takes us away from more godly pursuits. Not that creating, bringing wealth into your life is not important. We're going to talk about that. It's very important, but this text is going to put it all into the proper perspective. It's going to help reframe all that for us. Okay, so now he's going to give us the 5 material benefits. So far, we've just done the 5 spiritual benefits. So what could be the material benefits of this thing that we call bitachon, which, by the way, he hasn't even defined yet. So he's only going to define it in chapter number 1. But let's go over the 5 material benefits. Number 1, he never feels lack. Sometimes in life, there's people that are always feel like they're lacking. They have this, they call it now in modern terms, they call it scarcity mindset, right? They're always lacking something. The person who has bitachon never feels like that. He feels completely fulfilled, like he has everything he needs and more, right? Number 2, he's exempt from the fatigue of traveling, right? The traveling from place to place for looking for clients and contracts, and you have to country to country and city to city, right? And you can imagine 1,000 years ago, traveling was a really big deal. Today we get on a plane, and even when we get on planes, it's really exhausting. For those of us who travel a lot, we understand it does take a toll on the body. Imagine 1,000 years ago, right? So here he's saying, look, the master bitachon doesn't have to do any of that, okay? He can work without overextending him or herself. And that brings us to benefit number 3, which has to do with that, which is that he is free to choose a type of labor that is harm-free. And by harm-free, he tells us spiritually and physically harm-free. So he doesn't have to take risks, not in his health, not even in, things that have to do with materiality, but even in spiritually, he's not going to have to make a choice within labor that is going to compromise his spirituality. Sometimes we're in a position at work or career choices that we can be in a very, God forbid, tempting position to cut corners, do things that are questionable, gray areas, things like that. The master of bitachon would never, it's not a thing, right? They are literally going to always choose to be in a situation with work that is completely harm-free, both spiritually and physically. And then number 4 is going to be that he has no anguish in business, right? No anguish in business. Why? It's actually a very beautiful part of the book. And the idea here is why is he so chilled in his business? Why doesn't he have anguish in business at all? And business comes with a lot of stresses, okay? Anybody who's an entrepreneur knows it. But even if you're not an entrepreneur, okay? Why? The reason is because he has a partner, and a partner is capital P, has a capital P, and his partner knows how to achieve things in work, in business, so much better than he will ever, right? So much better. And very often in work and in business, we think we have the answer. We think we know that this is the strategy, or this is this is what we have to tell the lawyer, or this is how we have to structure the contract, or this is and if Hashem is your partner in business, he has a plan that is, you can't even you would never be able. It's so much better than anything that you could have come up with yourself. So he has no stress in business, because if your partner is an entity who's always going to have the most wildest plans that you would have never imagined, and they're always for good, then you can enjoy the ride of work, right? And then talking about enjoying the ride, that's actually number 5 or number 10, the final benefit of the 10 benefits, which is that he is always happy. He's always happy with exactly what he has at any given moment, because he knows his needs are taken care of. How? like a baby in his mother's arms. And he's going to give us this analogy. And when we get inside the book, we'll expound on it in a little bit more, because it's a beautiful analogy that I think we have to cement in our consciousness. But this idea of this contentment, this happiness that this Baal Bitachon has, because he feels just like a baby is in his mother's arms, and he just knows that everything is good in the world, that everything is taken care of. That's the level of happiness and contentment that this Baal Bitachon has. Okay, so up till now, we got the 10 benefits. We were able to kind of get a glimpse of what we're about to tackle. We're good. Give me a thumbs up, something. So I know that even though I was speaking very fast, we sort of got it. I didn't lose anybody. I only see Sherry and Linda, but if yes, okay, awesome. Okay, so now we're going to go into what happens in chapter 1. Chapter 1 is a very short chapter, and all he does, Rabbeinu Bachya here, is he gives us the definition of trust. The definition of trust is actually important for us to know, obviously, otherwise he wouldn't be giving it to us. And the definition of trust is as follows. Trust, and I'm going to summarize, it's a 2-page chapter, but I'm going to give you the one sentence or the 2 sentences of the 2-page chapter, which is: trust is the peace of mind and serenity acquired when a person knows that the person in whom, or the entity in whom he's trusting, is going to do exactly what he's trusting him for, and even go above and beyond. So it's a peace of mind and serenity that I know that I have when I know that he in whom I'm trusting is going to do exactly what I'm trusting him for, and go even beyond, right? So that is, if I know that this entity whom I'm trusting is obviously going to take care of everything that I'm relying on them for, and even go above and beyond that, then obviously I can go sleep at night, right? I am calm as a baby, we said, right? And it's very interesting, just so you guys start noticing little details here, that the way he defines it is an emotion. He says it's a peace of mind and serenity. And he says, he uses the word hargish here. I should get my glasses. Hold on one second, just at least for the Hebrew, because it's not I'm not seeing it here. One second, but I know it's here. And maybe it's not in this, maybe it's later it's in another chapter, but in another chapter, we're going to see that he's talking about a feel, even that it's talking about, he mentions the word that you have to feel it. Here, he just talks about the feeling itself, which is a peace of mind and serenity. But the point that I wanted to bring out is that this serenity is a feeling. It's a feeling that a person has based on the knowledge that they have. So again, from the intellect, from the intellectual work that we're doing, and knowing our creator, and knowing who is this entity in whom I'm reliant, and in knowing our own faulty thinking, as the author is going to take us through, and correcting it, right? We're going to then feel at peace. We're then going to feel serenity. Okay, so it's an emotional state. Bitachon is actually an emotional state that we get to, obviously, from the intellect, because every emotion is born from the intellect. And that's exactly what we're going to do going through this journey. So speaking of that, then he very logically actually takes us to chapter 2 to answer the question, well, if I'm going to trust in someone, in an entity who is going to do exactly what I'm trusting them for, and I'm going to achieve this level of peace and serenity, what qualities would that entity have to have, right? What would they have to have for me to actually put my absolute reliance on them? And he gives us 7 qualities, and these 7 qualities are actually extremely important to know. And I almost want to test some of our more seasoned students here to put some of the qualities in the chat to see if you remember some of them. But there are 7 qualities that this entity has to have in order for me to actually put my trust in them. Does anybody want to give a shot to a few of them and put them in the chat? I'm putting Sherry and Linda on the spot totally here. Maybe you, Lori, because I think you've been here before. And Sherry's probably looking at her notes, which is totally fine, by the way. Nobody wants to put? Well, I'm gonna throw, while you're looking, I'm gonna share them with you guys, okay? quality number one. This person in whom I'm going to put my trust by logic. Okay. Everything is by logic here. Wouldn't you say they have to be compassionate? Like they have to love me. They have to have mercy on me, right? They have to have a level of compassion, right? So this entity, in order for me to put my reliance on someone, they have to have compassion for me. Okay. So that's quality number one. Now that is not enough because they could have compassion, but what if I can't reach them when I need them, right? They have to be available. They have to be attentive 24/7. So quality number one is, yes, they have to love me. They have to have compassion for me. Number two, they have to be attentive. They have to literally have their eyes on my life 24/7. There cannot be a case where I get on the plane from, New York to LA and I can't reach you, or you were sleeping and I couldn't reach you. That cannot be the case if I'm going to fully depend on you. Okay, we're talking about full absolute reliance here, right? You have to come from a place that you love me, and you also have to be able to tend to my needs no matter what time of day. There's no falling asleep here. There's no disappearing in an airplane and being unreachable, right? You have to be on call 24/7. Now, beyond that, they also have to be able to help you, meaning they have to have the strength, the might. If there's something that can stop them, if the hurricane comes and can stop you from tending to my needs, or a tornado, or anything, right? Then obviously you're not fully reliable, right? We're talking about what qualities does an entity in whom I'm going to rely have to have. They have to be strong to the point of invincibility. There's nothing that can beat you at this, right? So they have to be compassionate. They have to be attentive. They have to be strong, right? To the point of invincibility. They also not just have to be strong, but they have to be wise. They have to have the wisdom to know the known and the unknown, right? The hidden and the revealed, right? Because if they don't know the entire picture, that which is obvious to the human eye and that which is beyond the perception of me and part of a bigger perception, how could I rely on them? They have to know things. They have to know the impact of things in my life. They have to have a level of wisdom that is very, complete. Like I don't have a better word, right? So compassionate, attentive, strong, wise. Not only wise, but the fifth one is they actually have to have a relationship with me to a level that they've always been there for me. There has to be this closeness, this track record, like they know me from beginning to end, like from the moment that my soul came into the universe, and then the soul was, put into this body in this family, and then till the end of my days, till 120 when I leave, they have to know me better than my mother and my father. Right? Because even those people are very close to me, right? I have a very intimate relationship with them, but they're not going to know me for my entire life. Well, this entity, if they're going to be fully dependable and reliable, they have to have a track record where they've been with me and will continue to be with me forever. Okay. So they have to know everything about me and how, the world around me affects me, but they also have to have a track record of closeness with me. So compassionate, attentive, strong, wise, close, or with a solid track record. And not only that, imagine that somebody else could tend to my needs, not just that entity, right? Imagine that I could say, I asked Sherry to go pick up my child at the airport, and Sherry says, okay, no problem. What time? Okay, 7:00. Okay, I got it taken care of. And then I say, you know what, Linda, why don't you go pick up my child at the airport? Right? So which one is it? Who's responsible here? Is it Sherry or is it Linda? Right? Well, if both of them can take care of, like, who am I relying on? So if I'm going to rely on somebody, it has to be on an entity that actually is the one who is solely responsible for what I'm relying them on, right? And has the ability. So they have to have the exclusive jurisdiction over my life. And maybe the airport example is not the best example. That's more an example of one of the conditions for trust to be real trust, which we're going to cover in a minute. But the idea here more is like, there have to be, You have to think, it's hard for us to think nowadays of, a master and a slave. But I think even the example that he's going to give us inside the text is going to say that, right? Imagine, right, in the olden days, if a person has a master, who's the only one who has sole jurisdiction and responsibility for that slave? Who dictates when they're going to get to eat, when they're going to get to drink, when they're going to get to go out, when is their day off, whatever it might be, right? So that's what we're talking about. Because if there's another entity that has the power to affect my life, then I cannot be fully reliant on entity number one. There cannot be anybody else. The point is, there cannot be anybody else that is dependable, that has an impact, that has an influence in my life. Because if there were, then obviously this entity number one is not fully dependable. So for there to be an entity that is fully dependable and reliable, it has to be that they have absolute complete jurisdiction over my life, and nothing else can dictate anything about my life. Okay, so they have to have compassion, they have to have attention, they have to have strength, they have to have wisdom, they have to have closeness to me or track record to me, and they have to be solely responsible for me. Absolutely nobody else can be responsible for anything regarding my life, right? And lastly, the last quality, which is actually a very beautiful one, is, well, they actually have to be extremely generous, not just when I deserve it or if I deserve it, but even if and when I don't deserve it, right? If this entity in whom I'm relying completely, it doesn't have the capacity of extreme generosity, right? Whether you deserve it or you don't deserve it, then I don't know, are they really fully dependable, fully reliable for me to put my entire life on their hands? No. So obviously now we're talking about 7 qualities that need to be in an entity, right? Compassionate, attentive, strong, wise, close, slowly responsible, and extremely generous to the deserving and the undeserving. Now, by logic, we're going to all conclude that there is no entity in the world who has all those 7 qualities, and that the only one who has those 7 qualities is going to be God Almighty. Not only does he have them, but if you think about it, he has them times infinity, right? To the, I don't know, to the nth degree. That's the level in which he has these qualities, okay? So by logic, we understand, how silly it would be for me to put my reliance on any other entity, which again is the trap in which we fall, right? We put our reliance, like he said already in the introduction, we tend to put our reliance on our wits or our strength or our money, right? Anything in this world. If we now realize all of that is very not reliable, because it doesn't make sense that I would put my reliance on something that doesn't love me, or that doesn't have the attention, or doesn't have the jurisdiction, or doesn't have the strength, or doesn't have the generosity. Like, it doesn't make sense, right? So by logic, now I'm understanding, so God is the only dependable, reliable entity. Okay, so that brings us now to chapter number 3. And in chapter number 3, he's actually going to repeat all these 7 qualities yet again, and he's going to re-emphasize them, and we're going to go over them again, and really all to say that they are extremely important. They are fundamental for us to know, because we have to know in whom we're trusting, and we have to ingrain in our brain that he has these 7 qualities, and therefore I cannot fall in the trap, or there must be a better expression, but I can't. My English today, I've been talking Spanish the whole day, so I'm not thinking so properly in English, but I can't fall into the trap of relying on something else. And therefore I have to constantly remind myself and bring myself back to this entity who is fully reliable. Okay, so chapter number 3, yes, he goes over these 7 qualities. And the reason he goes over them, 1, because it's so important, but number 2 is because he's going to do something really important, which is he's going to answer the question, great, now I know on whom I have to rely, but what is this reliance exactly? Meaning not just the definition, but what makes it solid? What makes it that my relationship is actually bitachon? Because I could fool myself. Like, I could say for my own life, I thought maybe I was a person with bitachon because I am a woman of faith, and I eat kosher and I keep Shabbos and whatever. And in fact, when you start understanding what bitachon is, and you start catching yourself relying on other things in the world that are completely fickle and unreliable, you realize, I really have no clue what bitachon is, right? So the reason what he's going to answer in chapter 5 is the very important question of what is needed in our life for us to be able to say, this is real trust. For us to say, that's what I'm aiming for. This is when this is in place in my life. Now I know I'm looking at real bitachon. And he's going to give us 5 factors. Okay. 5 factors that are needed for our trust to be real, authentic trust. And the first one of those 5 factors is we have to understand God's 7 trustworthy qualities, which he then encompasses in the concept of causality, which I don't know if is a real word, but we use it in this class all the time. In other words, it means that God, with all those qualities, is the cause of all causes. Once I understand that these are the qualities of God, I start understanding, he who does everything in my life and makes everything work is coming from that place, right? From that loving place, from that attentive place, from that place of strength, that place of jurisdiction, that place of wisdom. He's making everything. He's moving all the pieces. There's nobody else causing anything in my life. That understanding that there's only one cause of everything, which again, it's encompassed in the idea of he has the 7 trustworthy qualities, and therefore he becomes the cause of all causes, right? That whole understanding is condition number 1 of the 5 conditions for my trust to be real trust. Now, condition number 2 is going to be sincerity, which is pretty obvious, right? Because if we're talking about a relationship with God, and then we already know, well, God knows everything, right? We even said it in one of the 7 qualities. I mean, he's wise. He knows everything from beginning to end. He knows how I feel, and he knows if my trust is sincere. So I have this for this thing to be real bitachon, there has to be sincerity. Not only there has to be sincerity, but there has to be exclusivity, meaning it has to be exclusive, right? As he's already kind of leading us to already in the book to this point is, if I trust in something else, then I'm not actually trusting in God, because I haven't said it, but he's going to tell us in the introduction that we are all de facto trusting on something. The question is, what are we trusting on, right? And so this whole journey is going to take everybody else out of our lives, so to speak, and help us focus on the one entity that is absolutely reliable and dependable, right? So it has to, for trust to be real trust, it has to be exclusive. It can't be, I rely on my banker, I rely on the government, I rely on my asset management portfolio, I rely on my business and God. When things are not like, no, it can't be that I have a plan B. No. This is one address. Like everything is one address, as Michael Safdie says in his Daily Bitachon WhatsApp. There's one address, Yud K Vav K, right? I just rely on him. It has to be exclusive. Condition number 4 for bitachon to be actual bitachon is obedience. There has to be obedience. And that's kind of also logical. Everything about this book is very logical, right? If I say that I'm relying on something or someone, right, completely depending on them, and they tell me that this is what I should do in my life, right, for me to have the best life possible. Imagine a doctor, my very simple life from real life, right? Imagine you go to a doctor and the doctor tells you, you know what, looking at all your symptoms and looking at your history and everything, I'm seeing that really you need to work out for cardio 30 minutes a day. I want you to cut all sugar. I want you to take this set of vitamins, and I need you to do it for 30 days, and I need to see you in a month, right? And he's giving you that prescription, right, based on everything he knows about you. And then you come after 30 days to the doctor, and he checks you and he says, wait, have you actually done what I told you to do? Did you exercise for 30 minutes? Do you cut your sugar? And you're like, no, not really. Right. Well, obviously you don't trust that doctor if you're like, I don't know. I don't know. Like, I don't know if I'm going to do it. Like, right. If you don't do it. So, imagine in a relationship with God, right? So obviously, and I was just at a retreat speaking to women about all of these concepts. And obviously the question becomes, I'll answer it now, but like, but what if I'm not obeying everything, right? So we also have to be gentle here and know that we're all in a journey in this relationship. But the concept of understanding, you know what? Yeah, there has to be a level of obedience where at least I have to be on that journey or looking to grow and do more, and everybody at their own pace and at their own time, right? God doesn't expect us to be angels or anything like that. But for trust to be real trust, I have to understand that the prescription from the doctor is the right prescription, right? And I have to try to follow it as best I can with the information and the circumstances and the conditions of my life at the moment. I have to do my best to follow it. So that's what we're talking. We're talking about that level of obedience, right? So again, understanding that causality, that God is the cause of all causes. Sincerity, being completely sincere in our trust, because again, God knows. Exclusivity, it has to be exclusive. It can't be that I have somebody else that I'm going to, right? And there has to be obedience. And number 5, the 5th factor for trust to be trust, real trust, surprisingly, is effort. I actually have to put some effort in the world. I have to do something. I can't just literally sit back and say, okay, so God, you're going to supply all my needs. You're going to supply with everything, my food. No, literally, God says, I put you in this world. I need you to trust me, but yet I need you to do something in the world so I could actually send the blessing, right? So you need to pick up a phone and make a phone call. You need to plan the menu and buy the groceries, and cook the meal. And then you have to actually put it in your mouth. Like, you have to do something, right? Obviously, he's going to expound on this idea of effort, a lot. And we're going to put effort in the right perspective. But we have to understand that that's one of the 5 conditions for trust to be real trust, that there has to be effort. And he's actually going to give us the reasons why there's effort. And the basic reason, to summarize it, is because ultimately, working or doing something, right? Exerting some effort in the realm of nature is actually a test of integrity. It's actually been set up like this by God as to test us, to test if we're actually going to choose the right thing, right? Are we going to choose, the proper way to engage with the world? And we'll talk about that throughout the book. Okay. All right. So now he's going to answer a question that people might have in their minds, which is, 1 second, I know people who pass the test of integrity. They actually are always going to choose the right thing. And yet they have to work really, really hard. They have to toil in the world. We can think of examples of many righteous individuals who would never make a compromising choice or a non-kosher choice, in their engagement with the world. And yet they have to exert a lot of effort. Like, meaning, if you tell me the reason God put effort in the world is to test my integrity, to test if I'm going to make the right choices, well, then what about the person who passes the test with flying colors? It would suggest that they don't have to make any effort. And therefore, when I see people who have to exert effort and have passed with flying colors, I have the question, what about those people? How come this doesn't apply to them, right? Why, in other words, why do the righteous have to, quote unquote, suffer? Why would the righteous have to toil? And he's going to tell us that this is a very, what's the word? An old question that the prophets, the Nevi'im, and many sages have dealt with. It's a hard question to answer. And what he's going to do is he's going to say, you know what? I might not have the full answer because it's such a profound question that has been dealt with for a number of years in Jewish literature. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 5 ideas that could maybe satisfy you so that you can get through this, kind of doubt and actually continue with my logic through the book. Because if you get stuck in this question, you're never going to get to what I need to teach you, what Rabbeinu Bachya needs to teach you, which is bitachon. So he's going to say, this is a very deep question. It's been dealt with for many, many years by many of our sages and our prophets. But let me give you some alternatives, some ideas that have been thrown around throughout the years to kind of calm you down, because ultimately there is no one answer that we're 100%. This is the answer. This is a complex question. So the options that he gave us, the suggestions and the ideas to calm us down, is number 1, it could be that some people who you see pass the test of integrity and you would think they don't have to exert effort, and yet they do. It could be that they are doing so or have to do so because they have to atone for past sins. It could be, right? That could be a possibility. Number 2, he says, it could be that it's in exchange for an increased reward in the next world. It could be that now they have to toil, but this is because later on they're going to get a greater reward, right? It could also be that it's because other people need to learn from their example of tolerance despite their struggle, right? The other people need to see that individual struggle and yet tolerate the struggle. Reason number five that he's going to give us, or possibility number five, is that maybe they're taking on the suffering of the generation. Maybe they are that type of person that has been put in this world or in a certain context in the world to take on the suffering of a certain group of people. And number five is maybe they did not do enough to protest the sins of the generation, which again, he's going to give us examples, and he's going to give us the example of Elia Cohen and his sons. And all of this is going to be supported by different verses in Tanakh, but that's the general idea. Okay, so great. So that explains why the righteous would, quote unquote, suffer. So now what about the wicked? Why would the wicked prosper? So again, he's going to give us some ideas to satisfy us a little bit, at least maybe not a little bit, maybe a lot, but like enough to get us back into thinking about bitachon, because he knows that this is going to be a question that's going to bother us if we don't understand. If we say effort is put in the world because it's a test of integrity, and we say no, but there's people who pass the test of integrity, and I see that they still have to put a tremendous amount of effort, you got to give me something here. So he's giving us something. So now, why would the wicked prosper? He would say the following. He says, he gives us 5 reasons. Number 1, it could be now credit for past good deeds that they did, but it could be a debit in the reward of the world to come, right? So it could be something that's going to be debited to them now. They're prospering, quote unquote, right? It looks like things are going well for them, but it's actually because maybe they have some merit in the past, but you're not seeing that in the world to come. This is actually what they're gaining now, seemingly now, is actually going to be debited to them eventually. Okay. So then reason number 2 that he gives us is maybe they have a righteous child or a righteous descendant that is going to inherit their wealth or whatever their prosperity that they've achieved in this world, right? Because we're saying, why are the wicked people prospering and they don't have to toil? And we're saying that, the righteous are, kind of like really working really hard. All right. So maybe there's a child who's a very righteous child, and this money that they're acquiring is not actually for them. It's actually for their descendants, right? It also could be a setup. It could be a setup where his rising wealth is going to be something that leads to their own downfall. So again, it's showing us that we don't see the full picture. So he's giving us different possibilities of how things might work, okay? It also could be that this wealth that you're seeing, this prosperity that's coming to the wicked, might be an advance, because it might be that God knows that he's going to repent and he's going to deserve the reward. And it could be that God in his generosity is advancing the prosperity. Okay. So that's another possibility. And then finally, just similar to the fact that we said that he might have a righteous child, it could be that he has a righteous ancestor. So it could be that in the merit of his ancestor, his father, his grandfather, his grandmother, or whatever it might be, right? In their merit, they are being given this wealth. Okay. So in this chapter, then he's going to finally answer, okay, fine. So I get it. So bottom line is I have to work, and bottom line is a test. And bottom line, if I see other people who are being tested, even though I don't think they should be tested, and others who I think should be tested, but shouldn't, but I think should be tested, but they are not tested. Everything seems to going for them. I get it. I still have to put effort. Now, what do I put effort in? Like, there are many choices in the world. What do I put my effort in? Okay. So here he's going to answer with 3 things that we need to look out for when we're looking for a means of a livelihood, an activity in life in which we're going to put effort. And the 3 things that he's going to tell us are: you have to look at your makeup, the way God made you. You have to look at your nature and your inclination. Okay. And we're going to talk about that all in chapter 3. And this was my map. We have still 3 chapters for me to map out, but I think I probably exhausted you by now. What we're going to do is next week, we will do chapter 4, chapter 5, chapter 6, and 7, so that at least we're getting, and I hope this is helpful, like understanding the journey that he's taking us, I hope is of help before we even dive in. Okay. So let me ask the question. Are you guys okay? Is it helpful? Do we have any questions up to here? Again, we haven't finished the mapping of the book and we haven't delved into the concepts, but at least we got a pretty good picture. Are we good with that? I see there's a question here. Let me read. I say Hashem is my boss, not only my partner. I had this question all throughout my 3 years. My daughter was in Shidduchim, and all the time in my business, how to delineate and balance my effort and how far to push others involved to make effort while not relying on others, but only on Hashem. I'll say right now that I think by the end of you really understanding this full book, like nitty gritty, like we do it here, you're going to understand that effort is just something that we do and not something that we rely on. And it's going to switch your mind frame to understand that the more bitachon I have, the less effort I have to do. There's an inverse relationship between effort and bitachon. Yes, you have to do something. The question is how much of the something. And the more bitachon you have, you're going to see in your life that the less effort you have to put. I'm going to continue here reading. And again, this is going to be answered throughout the book. Pushing others involved, such as my husband felt and feels at times like I am not fully trusting on Hashem. Exactly. Yet the efforts seem to make me like responsible actions. So I want to say something. So how to balance it? So I want to say something to you and to everybody in the audience. This is, you said the word responsible. There is this notion that many of us grew up with, that that we feel that being attached and being, doing the effort and that it comes from a sense of responsibility. And if I have to be responsible, and it can be very, very toxic. So anybody who's like grown up with this high sense of responsibility, and I'm the first one, I'll say it, I'm an extremely responsible person, right? But we have to know that sometimes those of us who have that quality tend to be very, very, controlling or very married to the doing, okay, and the effort. And we hold a very tight grip on situations, on projects, on people around us. And it's the opposite of bitachon. Bitachon is about letting the grip go, because your effort is not producing anything, because you're pushing your employees or your client or your spouse or whatever is actually, you think you're doing the responsible thing. But if you actually do a litmus test, which is how are you emotionally and how are you in your, in your ability to fulfill other obligations of divine service, and both of those areas, if you start being very honest with yourself, and I'm not saying you, Tzipor, I'm saying general, all of us, we might be in for a very nice surprise and realize, oh, I'm actually really overextending myself. I'm actually staying up at night thinking, why did my employee not do this? And and that's like completely the opposite of bitachon. Bitachon says you leave the office at 5 and you're done. Like that's it. Right. And you don't have to get frustrated at your husband because he didn't bring enough money and this and that. So there's a lot here to be said that I can't answer for the experience better than giving you the experience of learning it inside. Because when you learn it inside, it's going to become so clear to you how you can have a better relationship with work, and one where you're not holding the grip. Okay. And people who have a high level of responsibility, like many of us, have a tendency to be trying to hold a very strong grip. Okay. Beautiful. You made me smile. Looking forward to learning it inside. Okay. Fantastic. Okay. Anything else? Any comments? You can also open the mic if you want. Are we good? Yes. Sherry, was it good to start the map again? Linda, was it good to do the map again? Yeah. Doesn't feel repetitive? But again, into our psyche. God willing, we will finish the whole map. And God willing, I think we might have time to even start with the introduction, with the journey. Okay. So everybody should have a good Shabbos. I will be sending out the replay. And thank you for